Starting off this countdown, we have Pope Boniface VIII. This dude was the definition of corrupt and disgusting. So he was the head of the Catholic Church from 1294 until his death in 1303. Let's just say that he did not practice what the church was preaching. This dude was known to take advantage of a number of young men. In response, he said that it was as natural as rubbing one hand against the other. So he said taking advantage of the young was totally fine. Not only that, but one time he got it on with a married woman and her daughter. I know. It's gross. In our 9th spot, we have simony. Simony is something that was practiced around the Middle Ages. It's the act of buying your way into church offices. This became a huge problem in the 9th and 10th century. So basically, the church was selling positions in the office. This allowed people who had money to become clergy members. Half the time, they weren't even educated and couldn't even read or didn't know how to perform ordinary religious services. But what the church only cared about was money. In 1487, the Pope sold 24 offices, and people were outraged because unqualified people were becoming bishops or cardinals. The church would also do this with religious items. They would sell them for tons of money and people would foolishly buy them from the church. In our 8th spot, we have the Pittsburgh priests. A couple of years ago, it was revealed that 6 Pennsylvania priests routinely took advantage of a number of individuals over the course of several decades. One disturbing report claims that they made a young man pose like Christ on the cross while they photographed him doing so. The photos were then sent to a number of other priests. The total amount of priests accused are 300. This is absolutely disgusting, and I feel so bad for the innocent victims that were taken advantage of. In our 7th spot, we have ignoring the situation. When Pope Francis heard the story that I just mentioned, you know what he had to say? He said, and I quote, "Most of these cases belong in the past." Meaning, hey, thanks for coming forward, but let's move on from the past and ignore everything that happened. He continued on saying, and I quote, "If one member suffers, all suffer together with it." He said that after it was revealed how many priests were found guilty. Now, people weren't happy by him saying this because, first off, he's never going to feel the same suffering as the victims, and second, he's more worried about how bad this makes the church look rather than bringing justice for the victims. In our 6th spot, we have hiding the past. People are incredibly furious how the Pope handled all of the allegations made against the priests. The right thing for him to do would be allow criminal authorities to access the church records worldwide, so they can try and get justice for all the victims and get rid of the men taking advantage of their power and position. But of course, he won't allow that, nor will the other men who run the church. Instead, it's let's keep it all hush hush and hope no other victims come forward. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the years of cover-ups. Back in 2018, it was revealed that Bishop Juan Barros of Chile was accused of covering up clerical abuse for years. The bishop denied, saying he never knew about this, but one of the victims say that he was there when one of the incidents happened and bore witness to it all and then did nothing. For years, this bishop covered up several incidences and protected the perpetrators. This just makes me sick. After being called out though, he did resign. Coming in at number 4, we have the punishments for disobeying. Bishop Gonzalo Duarte Garcia de Cortazar is another member of the Catholic Church that used his power to take advantage of a number of individuals. There were reports of him doing this all the way back to 1992. Back in 1992, he publicly slapped a student because the student refused to kiss him on the lips. In fact, this was common. If the students wouldn't do as he told them to, they would be slapped or punished. And Bishop Juan Barros was responsible for covering this all up, so word wouldn't get out. Coming in at number 3, we have the slush funds. The church has also been known to do sketchy and illegal things with their money, such as move Vatican money through slush funds across Europe. On top of that, they used $250 million of the church's money to invest in luxury London apartments, which ultimately tanked. They even contemplated investing hundreds of millions of dollars into oil fields. This money was supposed to support palpable charities. They also have a history of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. How great is that? Of course though, they'll always get away with it because they're the church. Moving on to number 2, we have the ties with Hitler. Did you know that during World War II, the church actually made a deal with Hitler? Yeah, The deal allowed the dictator to increase his power in Germany without interference from the church if he promised to basically leave the church alone. So instead of standing up to him and the horrors that he was committing, they turned a blind eye and were like, leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. On top of that, in 1939, on the dictator's 50th birthday, they flew Nazi flags for him. Then they actually received tons of money from him, but used the IOR to hide this, so it wouldn't look like they profited from their relationship with the dictator, when in fact, we all know that they did. And in our number one spot today, we have the Catholic clergy in France. Just this year, it was found that Catholic clergy members in France took advantage of over 216,000 individuals over the past 7 decades. Again, that is absolutely disgusting. On top of that, a report found that the church prioritized its own protection, so it told the victims to stay silent. It said that between 29,000 to 32,000 predators worked in the French Catholic Church between 1950 to 2020. The report also found, and I quote, "The church's attitude could be summarized as one of concealment, relativization, or even denial, with only a very recent recognition dating from 2015. The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse."
In at number 10, this creepy video was captured at the Lincoln Cathedral in England. First of all, the exterior of this church looks like it could be the set of a horror movie, and what possessed this person to go to church at night? I have no idea. Well, it's a little bit too dark and windy for my liking. Well, things took a turn for the worse when they stumbled across this. Well, take a look for yourself. Okay, did I see that right? It looks like a face is protruding from the wall, and then all of a sudden it disappears when the cameraman went to investigate it. I'd be getting the heck out of there, and I'd probably never return to that church ever again. I'd probably have to make a pit stop to another church because I have to do some Hail Marys after seeing that ghost head. A creepy art project is up next at number 9. The St. George Church was left abandoned after the roof collapsed. The locals in the area saw this as a bad omen, so they didn't even want to repair the church. But I guess an art student took it upon themselves to fill in the pews with creepy ghost figures instead. Take a look. Okay, this is not okay in my books. Actually, this might be the scariest art project that I've ever seen. I feel like if the church wasn't haunted before, well, it definitely is now. A shadowy figure is up next at number 8. This extremely scary picture was taken inside of a Catholic church somewhere over in Poland. Everyone there was celebrating a first communion, but the party was crashed by the shadowy figure who was seen creeping between the aisles. It's quite possible that this is just a result of a camera malfunctioning, but the thing is, are you willing to bet your life on that? I know I'm not. Insane insect infestation crawls onto our list at number 7. I get it, sometimes older buildings have an insect problem. You might see the occasional ant or centipede. You know, I can forgive that, but what I can't forgive is this. Is this real life right now? Is this the only church in town? Why are people content with this? How the heck can you be singing at a time like this? I mean, you all need to bathe in some holy water and all stand in front of a strong fan to get all of those termites off of you. This is not okay. I'm pretty sure this church needs an exorcism and an exterminator at the same time. Number 6, the man with glowing eyes. During a service at a church, someone accidentally captured this picture of a man with some pretty unsettling eyes. Some people are even saying that this creature isn't even human, while others think that he's wearing glasses and it's just the light reflecting off of them. I honestly don't know what to believe. He kind of looks like a gnome from hell, and those people in the church might be in a whole lot of trouble. But did you guys also notice there's a weird floating object hovering over the guy next to the gnome? I mean, what the heck is going on in this church? I think everyone inside needs to be blessed. Bringing us to number 5, we have a ghost spirit caught on camera. A paranormal investigation team were exploring an old abandoned church in England, well, when they stumbled across this eerie sight. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. As you can see, a ghostly figure passes by one of the windows, and it looks like they're wearing a long white dress or robe of some sort. This church dates back to 1135, so it's very possible that it's had its fair share of scary ghost encounters. Next up on our list, number 4, we have a Jesus statue caught moving. Okay, pay close attention to the statue's eyes, because what I'm about to show you guys is gonna happen pretty quickly. Okay, let's play that again, but in slow motion. How the heck did the guy filming this have no reaction whatsoever? I'm completely traumatized, and I wasn't even there for that. I feel like Jesus was staring into my soul, and he didn't even like what he saw, so he just closed his eyes. This statue of Jesus Christ is located inside of the church in Mexico, and since this video was released, thousands of people have been going to this church to watch the statue move for themselves. But I'm pretty sure a moving statue would just deter me from ever visiting it. A ghost makes an appearance at a shrine, and this takes us to number 3. This next clip I'm about to show you guys was taken in a church over in Ireland. This church houses the national shrine of St. Oliver Plunkett, who was an Irish saint who was condemned to death. And that was although he was completely innocent. So you're gonna see his cell door and possibly St. Oliver Plunkett himself. Watch.
This is the door of the cell in Newgate Prison, where St. Oliver Plunkett was in prison for 8 months.
He's a very interesting figure, because he was...
Okay, no, you're not crazy. I think I saw him as well. So it could be possible that his spirit is still attached to the cell door, or could something more sinister be going on here? Well, you know what? I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Jesus is caught moving again, and this takes us to number 2. Seriously, what is up with all these moving Jesus statues? Stop it! I'm really not okay with this, but you guys clicked on this video, so you know what? Here's another scary clip for you.
Reconozcan al Señor Jesús como el Hijo amado que el Padre ha enviado para salvación de todos.
Okay, what did I just watch? This is the reason why I don't go to church. There's too much scariness happening there. I think I'm developing an irrational fear of Jesus statues. I thought church was supposed to be a safe place, but instead of being comforted, I'm being tormented. Dark shadowy figure creeps onto our list at number 1. Well, take a look at this picture right here. It looks like the church might have a demon problem, maybe multiple demons. I don't know what's worse, those termites that we just saw or this devilish demon. And I can't even make out what this thing is. It looks like he has really long arms and legs. Maybe he's a spider demon. Well, whatever he is, I never want to see him in the flesh, because I honestly don't think that I would be walking out of that church alive.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Vatican Library. The Vatican Library is a very secret library closed to the public. The only people that have access to it are popes and people that have gone through a lengthy screening process, and even then, they need to know exactly what they are wanting information on and will only be given info on what they ask for. This library is the top secret library with history and documentation since the beginning of time. The amount of dark gossip that is within those walls, I'm sure, is exponential. From the little that we know, the Vatican Library holds letters from world leaders throughout history detailing major events that us little guys will probably never be privy to. I'm sure they even have documentation on alien sightings. The church refuses to talk about what they have and know, and it's really just a shame. I'm a history lover myself, and truly that would be a magical experience to be able to explore this library. Ah well. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to be recommended more content like this. In our number 9 spot, we have Operation Snow White. On June 20th, 1977, Michael Meisner, a Scientologist, contacted the FBI after allegedly being held captive for months. He revealed that he was a part of the biggest infiltration of the US government in history in something called Operation Snow White. On July 8th, 1977, 156 FBI agents entered a Scientology center in LA in the largest FBI
FBI raid in history. It was discovered that 5,000 Scientology agents infiltrated the IRS, the US Coast Guard Intelligence, DEA, etc. There were bugged offices, planted false information, stolen files, and so much more found. Apparently, the goal of this initiative was to remove any bad reports about Scientology. Some of the founders were sentenced to a few years in jail because of these crimes. They definitely want you to forget about this, but I'm sure they have done it again, and I'm sure other churches and organizations have done the same thing. We just haven't heard about it, and perhaps they haven't been caught. In our number 8 spot, we have exorcisms. This one shocked me. I knew that priests could do exorcisms, but I didn't realize that this is something that they do much. I truly thought that exorcisms were done more often in the movies to young girls doing the crab walk down the stairs. Yeesh, thinking of that scene gives me the shivers. Anyways, apparently the Vatican had a chief exorcist named Father Gabriel Amorth, who had served over 60 years to the church and had performed over 160,000 exorcisms. Excuse me? Wow. How have there been that many people infiltrated by demons and this info isn't more widely talked about? Also, that is just this guy's number. Apparently popes and priests around the world perform exorcisms all the time. I'm shooketh. I could understand that the church wouldn't want to talk about this because it is a private, very sad thing to happen to a person, but man, that's a lot of people walking around feeling like they have demons within them. Pretty scary. In our number 7 spot, we have His Holiness. His Holiness was a book that was released to the public in 2012, which is based on the secret leaked papers about Pope Benedict. Apparently, the private documents were leaked by the Pope's butler. Yikes. Apparently, after an investigation, it was discovered that the individuals who were not from the Vatican were blackmailing gay bishops because they had broken their celibacy vows. The Pope went on to resign after these documents became public. Well, this is definitely a scandal, that's for sure. I remember people talking about this when it was happening, but I don't remember hearing the church comment on it. But I guess they sort of did through their actions, and I'm sure Pope Benedict was encouraged to resign. In our number 6 spot, we have the dead man on trial. This is a little piece of history that truly terrifies me and is such a testament to those times. In 897 AD, a literal dead man was put on trial. The man had been dead for 7 months. He had been dressed for the occasion by someone whom I'm sure was traumatized afterward. His name was Pope Formosus. He was being put on trial for acts that he had committed in his life. He had a lawyer and everything. He was found guilty and stripped of his former title as Pope, and everything he formerly did was declared void. His body was stripped of his clothes and put into rags before he was thrown into a river, the Tiber River in Italy, specifically because this river was where a lot of criminals' bodies were disposed of. Pretty gross. I wonder if there are any ghost haunting stories from this river. I bet you there are. In our number 5 spot, we have the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank has had its fair share of scandals over the years, and you best believe that the church will not be bringing any attention to it by speaking about it in any way. Allegedly, to start off the scandals, it is said that the Vatican Bank received a church tax from Germany's leader during World War II, if you catch my drift. Also, allegedly, a large amount of money was paid to the IOR so that the Western banks couldn't track the Vatican's spending. The details have never been released to the public, so Lord knows where they put their money. But why would you want to hide your money in the first place? Perhaps so that no one would know what you're up to if you're up to no good, but also possibly because someone might be a threat, and that might be a reason to shield what you're doing. Either way, the secrecy is questionable. In our number 4 spot, we have mental illness in the church. When researching for this video, one of the things that shocked me was the amount of people that spoke about how the churches do not handle mental illness very well. You would assume that it would be approached with love and compassion and guidance to get help. But the common theme is that people have been told to just pray and it will make the illness go away. Some believe that this thought process stems from the very old thinking that mental illness stems from demons being in one's body, and so people are being told to pray them away because that's what was always done if someone needed, an exorcism or to get rid of an attached spirit. The biggest problem is that issues go untalked about. The people bottle it up inside, and when prayer doesn't work, the person dealing with the mental illness feels like a failure or like they don't have enough faith. Hopefully this is something that churches of all religions work on improving, as this is just unacceptable at this point in time. In our number 3 spot, we have shame. Within many religions, there has been the problem of spiritual criticism, which has led to emotional harm within the church communities. I'm not talking about outsiders passing judgment, I'm talking about religious community members passing judgments on each other. This bad behavior is committed under the banner of spirituality. From practices of shaming members if they don't fulfill religious expectations, to bad-mouthing members who have left, making people want to stay out of fear. Scientologists have been accused of doing that to members that have tried to leave, but also other churches have been accused of this as well. It's super unfortunate to hear that in communities that have, the core purpose of being loving, they are people that are shaming each other. Talk about not practicing what you preach. In our number 2 spot, we have misusing their power. In recent years, it has become public knowledge that the French clergy took advantage of more than 200,000 individuals since the 1950s, mainly males. The Catholic Church has been accused of turning a blind eye to this happening, and many have been outraged that this went on for so long without someone stepping in. Allegedly, it wasn't until the 2000s that some progress was made. Before that, the church showed complete indifference to the victims. Through a series of investigations, 2,700 victims gave testimonies about what happened to them, and thousands were identified through archives. A wide range study showed that there could be up to 330,000 victims. In recent years, about 2,900 to 3,200 priests have become suspects to these crimes. Wow. Truly despicable. I hope that there is some kind of justice for these victims. In our number 1 spot, we have the Salem witch trials. Most people believe that the witch trials were a result of many things: bad weather, a poor government, and paranoid leaders. But what a lot of people may not be aware of is the idea that the Catholic and Protestant churches possibly used the trials to compete with each other for followers. Pretty dark. History.com reported that economists Peter Leeson and Jacob Russ believe that, quote, the two churches advertised their finesse at persecuting witches as proof that they were the best church to join if you wanted protection from Satan. Witches, after all, were doing the bidding of Satan, so getting rid of them was a way to protect people from them. Wow. Well, that will definitely persuade 1 or 2 people, that's for sure. It has also been noted that the Catholic Church did not fear or acknowledge witches in history until the Protestant Church became a competitor threat.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have exorcisms. So one would think that exorcisms would be strictly reserved for horror movies and the like, but that is simply not true. They are definitely a real-life nightmare, and the former chief exorcist of the Vatican certainly knows all about them. The late priest, Father Gabriel Amorth, served in this position for more than 60 years, and throughout his career he is said to have performed approximately 160,000 exorcisms. That's an insane number. What's even more concerning is it's not like he's the only one doing them. There are tons of priests who perform these things. So much so that there's a workshop at the Vatican that has welcomed 250 priests from across the world to learn how to perform such a thing. This is all to say that a lot more exorcisms are happening than I would have liked to think. In our number 9 spot today, we have the man on trial. Okay, history is full of a lot of weird stuff, especially when it comes to laws and court and all of that stuff. Things were really different back then, and this is an example of just how different. In 897 AD, the Catholic Church put a dead man on trial. People have definitely been held accountable after death in our modern society. A posthumous trial can be held for a variety of reasons, but that's not what happened here. No, they actually exhumed the body of this man after he had been dead for 7 months already, and they literally brought his body to the courtroom. Necessary? Probably not. Dramatic? Most certainly. I thought jury duty now was bad. Imagine being the jury for that trial. This man on trial was Pope Formosus, and he was being accused of usurping the papacy. In the end, he was found guilty of this. All of his acts as pope were declared null and void. His body was then stripped of all official garments and instead dressed in rags. His 3 fingers of benediction were cut off and his body was thrown into the river. They very obviously took this all very seriously. In our number 8 spot today, we have Wine Wednesday. Okay, this one might not be terrifying, but I guess that depends on how you feel about wine. According to reports, it is said that the wine consumption in the Vatican is greater than any other country. Like, statistically, the average person living in the Vatican consumes 20 gallons of wine every year. It's a lot of wine. That's 3 times the average of someone in the UK, 6 times as much as someone in the US, and twice as much as the typical resident of France and Italy. If only there wasn't so much other creepy stuff going on in the Vatican, it might actually be a good time. In our number 7 spot today, we have the crime rate. The Vatican is the smallest state in the world in terms of both area size and population size. Despite this fact, however, it still manages to have one of the highest crime rates in the entire world. Not what you would think for the Holy State, right? The crime rate in the Vatican is said to be 20 times higher than the crime rate in Italy. It's said that there is 1.5 crimes per person. It is said that this is due to the high number of tourists, which makes the area a pickpocket's dream. But who's to say for sure if that's the case? Either way, best to keep your eyes and ears peeled if you're ever walking through those streets, apparently. In our number 6 spot today, we have the digital world. Okay, definitely less terrifying and more just bizarre, or I guess surprising is probably the right way to put it. During his time in the position, Pope Benedict XVI liked to send text messages to his subscribers around the world. Surprisingly, in 2009, the Vatican even opened up a YouTube channel to show different papal addresses and ceremonies. To take this all even a step further, the Vatican even had an app for smartphones. Imagine being the person who created it. The app contained multiple different versions in different languages of a prayer book and the prayers of daily mass. Just months before his resignation, Pope Benedict XVI even got a Twitter account. So, the papacy is going digital, apparently. In our number 5 spot today, we have the secret archives. The secret archives of the Vatican are one of the best known things about the entire state, but what exactly is in them remains much of a mystery. The archives are 53 miles long and there are thousands and thousands of catalogs. Only scholars can access these catalogs, but it still takes quite a bit of time and effort to get a pass to see them. Also, once you're there, you have to request what you want. There's no browsing the archives allowed. The official purpose of these archives is to house important paperwork and things pertaining to the Pope, but many people have speculated about all the secrets that these archives could be holding. Considering how many things and stories most of us have heard about what secrets may be hiding in the Vatican, one can only guess what atrocities may lurk in some of the pages found in these archives. In our number 4 spot today, we have the bank. The Institute for Works of Religion, also known as the Vatican Bank, is certainly no stranger to scandal, as it has definitely seen its fair share over the years. This bank was first established during World War II, during a time that Italy was fighting against the Allied forces. Out of all of the controversies throughout the years, the bank and their dealings with the guy who we'll call Adolf Hitler for the sake of this video is by far the most controversial. It has been reported that the Vatican received a considerable church tax from the evil guy annually. A lot of this money was paid this way so that it couldn't be tracked by Western banks, and this is kind of how the IOR became known as the world's top offshore bank. The Catholic Church has of course made use of the IOR to store tons and tons of its money, the extent of which has never been revealed to the public, so we will likely never know exactly what went on with all of these shady World War II dealings. In our number 3 spot today, we have family ties. This is something that really came to light in 1982. In that year, the Vatican Bank president resigned from the role after a series of scandals that ended up exposing the bank's ties to the mafia. In the end, the bank had to repay more than $200 million to its creditors because of this entire scandal. The bank president was never indicted on any of these crimes, but he has been suspected of not only these crimes, but also being involved in several mysterious deaths. Like, what in the world? This is so wild. In the end, he had diplomatic immunity in the United States, and he retired in Arizona in the 1990s, where he lived out the rest of his life. In our number 2 spot today, we have tax evasion. So there's a rule where the Vatican enjoys a property tax break for all non-commercial properties that contain a chapel. It's a pretty sweet deal, and they apparently decided to try and kind of take advantage of that a little bit. Between the years 2001 and 2006, the Vatican allegedly kind of evaded taxes that amounted to a cool 4 billion euros. The European Court of Justice, of course, ruled this entire thing illegal, and that is why the Vatican had to later procure 4 billion euros as post-dated tax. Many people speculate that this is just a drop in the bucket of what they owe in evaded taxes, but I don't even know how to do my own taxes, so who am I to say? In our number 1 spot today, we have the Secret Court. This one isn't so much a secret anymore, but it was up until 2009. The Vatican has a secret court for sins that are based on conscience. The bishops who handle these hearings are known as the Tribunal of Conscience, and this whole idea was created by Pope Alexander in 1179, and like I mentioned, was kept a secret from the public until 2009. The sins that this court sees range from the spitting out of a communion wafer all the way to things like priests breaking their vow of celibacy, and I'm sure a lot more stuff that we just won't even get into. You know, fun stuff. The tribunal, of course, considers these matters, but the decision-making in the end lies with the major penitentiary.
Number 10. Clara Germana Seely. Clara Germana Seely was a South African Christian girl who in 1906 was said to be possessed by a demon. She is said to have been possessed when she was a schoolgirl at St. Michael's Mission. Clara was an orphan, and at the age of 16 she allegedly made a pact with Satan, and this is said to be the cause of her demonic possession. In an account written by a nun, Clara was said to be able to speak languages of which she had no previous knowledge. This fact was also witnessed by others who recorded that she understood Polish, German, French, Norwegian, and all other languages. The nun also reported that Clara demonstrated clairvoyance by revealing the most intimate secrets and transgressions of people with whom she had no contact. Also, Clara could not bear the presence of blessed objects and seemed powered with extraordinary strength and ferocity, often hurling nuns about the convent rooms and beating them up. According to some, Clara was said to have levitated 5 feet in the air, sometimes vertically and sometimes horizontally, and when sprinkled with holy water, she was reported to have come out of the state of her satanic possession. During the exorcism, Clara's first action was to knock the Holy Bible from the priest's hands and grab his stole in an attempt to choke him with it. At the end of the exorcism, it was said that the demon was forced out and she was healed. Number 9. Ronald Doe. In the late 1940s in the United States, priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on an anonymous boy, documented under the name Ronald Doe. The boy was the alleged victim of demonic possession, and the events were recorded by the attending priest. It said after a family death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving on its own accord, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. The family then turned to their pastor for help. During the exorcism, the boy allegedly slipped one of his hands out of the restraints, broke a bed spring from under the mattress, and used it as an impromptu weapon, slashing the priest's arm and resulting in the exorcism ritual being halted. When they did another exorcism, it was stated during the scene that words such as evil and hell, along with other various marks, appeared on the teenager's body. Allegedly, during the litany of the saints portion of the exorcism ritual, the boy's mattress began to shake. Number 8. Barbie Hallet. Barbie Hallet was a young servant in Quebec in the 1660s who was possessed by a demon. Priests and nuns performed rituals to drive the demons away, with the bishop and governor argued about how to investigate their suspicions of witchcraft. A local miller named Daniel Voley, accused of using his knowledge of the dark arts to torment Barbie, was imprisoned and then executed. Barbie continued to experience the symptoms of demonic possession for months even after the alleged witch was executed. The end of Barbie's ordeal came in the form as an exorcism, or what sounds very much like one, conducted by a layperson using a rib bone believed to belong to the deceased John de Brebeuf. And fun fact, this was Canada's first documented demon possession case. Number 7. Father Gabriel. In 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome and was dealing with one troubled man. He asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man he was dealing with began to curse
and spit and started using English instead of his native Italian. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Father Gabriel said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. He said, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess the servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man, fixed with a glare, snarled and said, "I am Lucifer." Father Gabriel was shocked. He did not expect to receive such a terrifying response. Now the father mostly used prayer as his weapon, and as Father Gabriel continually commanded the demon to leave its host, it eventually left. Number 6. David Glatzel. In 1981, a young boy named David Glatzel had played host to a demon. After witnessing a number of increasingly ominous occurrences involving David, his family, exhausted and terrified, decided to enlist the aid of Ed and Lorraine Warren in a last-ditch effort to cure him. David's family had seen him being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterward. David also started to growl, hiss, speak in otherworldly voices, and recite passages from the Bible as well. The Glatzel family, along with the Warrens, then proceeded to have a formal exorcism performed on David. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also have claimed to see the devil sitting in it. Number 5. Arnie Johnson. And that leads us to our next point of Arnie Johnson. During one of David's exorcisms, Arnie coerced one of the demons to possess him while participating. Afterwards, Arnie's personality completely changed. He would fall into a trance-like state where he would growl and hallucinate, but later have no memory of it. Then one day, after he and his girlfriend Debbie's landlord was drunk and misbehaving, Ernie ended his life. The day after the incident, Lorraine Warren informed the Brooklyn police that Ernie was possessed when the crime was committed. The case then went on to trial, where Ernie's defense was demonic possession and the devil made me do it. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days before convicting Ernie of first-degree manslaughter. Though he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, though he only served 5. Number 4. Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor became notable in England in 1974 as a result of the Ossett and his alleged demonic possession. Michael lived in Ossett, West Yorkshire, working as a butcher. In 1974, his wife, Christine, stated to a Christian fellowship group to which Michael belonged that his relationship with the lay leader of the group, Marie Robinson, was carnal in nature. Michael admitted that he felt an evil within him, and during the next meeting, Michael received an absolution, but nevertheless, his behavior continued to become more erratic. As a result, the local vicar called in other ministers experienced in the deliverance in preparation to cast out the demons residing within the man. The exorcism, which occurred on the 5th and 6th of October 1974 at St. Thomas's Church in Galber, was headed by Father Peter Vincent and was aided by Methodist clergyman the Reverend Raymond Smith. The exorcists believed that they had, in an all-night ceremony, invoked and cast out at least 40 demons. At the end, exhausted, they allowed Michael to go home, although they felt at least 3 demons were still left with him. Number 3. Julia. Dr. Richard Gallagher had a girl named Julia come to his house and tell him that she was possessed. Julia exhibited a series of behaviors that constituted a once-in-a-century possession, from speaking in languages she claimed not to have known to allegedly levitating for over half an hour during an exorcism. "I know I'm possessed," Julia told Richard during a consultation. "I space out and then I don't recall what happens. They tell me a voice comes out of me. I don't know. I don't remember anything. It's a demon, I'm sure." Objects would fly off shelves around her. She somehow knew personal details about Richard's life, like how his mother had died of ovarian cancer, and the fact that the 2 cats in his house went absolutely berserk fighting each other the night before one of her sessions. Julia even found a way to reach him even when she wasn't with him, he says. He was talking on the phone with Julia's priest one night when both of the men heard one of the demonic voices that came from Julia during her trances, even though she was nowhere near a phone and thousands of miles away. Number 2. 2. Anneliese Michael. Anneliese Michael was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death. When she was younger, she experienced a seizure and was diagnosed with psychosis caused by temporal lobe epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with depression and was treated by a psychiatric hospital. By the time she was 20, she had become intolerant to various religious objects and began to hear voices. After the taking of psychiatric medications for 5 years failed to improve her symptoms, Anneliese and her family became convinced that she was possessed by a demon. As a result, her family appealed to the Catholic Church for an exorcism. While rejected at first, 2 priests got permission from the local bishop in 1975. The priests began conducting exorcism sessions and the parents stopped consulting doctors. She became increasingly scary, speaking about dying to atone for the wayward youth of the day and to the apostate priests of the modern church. A total of 67 exorcism sessions, 1 or 2 each week, lasting up to 4 hours each, were performed over approximately 10 months in 1975 and 1976. And coming in at number 1 is Anna Uckland. Anna Uckland's demonic possession and exorcism occurred over several decades, culminating in an extensive exorcism that lasted from August 18th to December 23rd, 1928 in Erling, Iowa. Anna was said to have exhibited symptoms similar to possession beginning as a young girl and was 46 years old during her final exorcism by Father Theophilus Riesinger, a Roman Catholic priest. She would levitate, howl, and hang from the frame of a doorway. The extensive exorcism resulted in deterioration of her body as she refused to consume food, also vomiting foul debris and what appeared to be tobacco leaves. Her head, lips, and face reportedly swelled, and she was also able to speak in multiple languages unknown to her. Anna was believed to be possessed by Judas Iscariot as well as Jacob, her own father, who had cursed her with the help of his lover, and her aunt Mina. On December 23rd, the final day of the exorcism, Father Riesinger commanded the demons in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, to depart to hell. Anna collapsed on her bed and began to shriek, Beelzebub, Judas, Jacob, Mina, followed by hell, hell, hell. She opened her eyes and then spoke in her own voice, saying, My Jesus, mercy, praise be Jesus Christ. The exorcism was successful, and Anna's case is considered by theology and paranormal scholars to be one of the most abundantly documented cases of possession in the 20th century, including a profile in the 1936 issue of Time magazine.
Starting off this countdown, we have absolving sins with money. Basically, back in the day, the Catholic Church told people that they could absolve their sins and get a ticket to heaven if they just paid them. Like, you were paying the church for forgiveness. Sorry, that's not how these things work. It also got to the point where people were paying for future sins. Not only that, they claimed that for a fee, relatives could get their deceased loved ones out of purgatory. And people fell for this all. Not only that, but poor people thought that they were screwed. They're like, if we sin, it's over. We can't afford to pay to get our sins forgiven. I wouldn't be surprised if the rich went around committing crimes and killing people, then being like, here's some cash, I'm all good now, thanks. In our 9th spot, we have imprisoning Galileo. In 1663, Galileo was like, science is greater than God. He also said that the sun was the center of the universe and claimed that the earth moved around it. I mean, he was on to something there, but just, he was slightly off. Anyways, the church didn't like these claims because it conflicted with the teachings of the church, so they imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in his home for years. I mean, they threatened him with torture, imprisonment, and even being burned at the stake, so let's just say he got off easy compared to those other punishments. It wasn't until 350 years later did the church be like, okay, yes, we agree, Galileo was on to something. Moving on to number 8, we have cutting funding. For years, the church gave thousands of dollars to a non-profit organization, Compañeros, that would help Hispanic immigrants get access to healthcare, among other things. That was until they found out that Compañeros supported a gay and lesbian rights group. So the church cut the funding to this company for their connection to the LGBTQ2S+ community. They're not the only group that the church has done this to, though. No, apparently, and I quote, since 2010, 9 groups from across the country have lost financing from the campaign because of conflicts with Catholic principles. Moving on to number 7, we have the gay clergy member. In 2018, a secret Catholic group came forward claiming they had information all about their clergy member, Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell. They claimed that he was using the gay male dating app Grindr and would visit gay bars weekly. Now, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being gay. What's wrong is shaming this poor man and outing him, and the poor man had to resign. Obviously, this is something the Catholic Church doesn't want us to know. Why? Because they say homosexual acts is immoral and contrary to the natural law. They also say homosexual tendencies are objectively disordered. And they also preach celibacy. So having a clergy member that is gay is highly controversial for them, and they tried to hide it. A lot of Catholics were outraged when word got out. Scariest part is how they found out about Jeffrey in the first place. Apparently the group was tracking his movements based on the apps he was using. Pretty terrifying and also very, very wrong. Moving on to number 6, we have Joan of Arc. Turns out that the church wasn't the biggest fan of Joan of Arc. In fact, at one point she was pretty much the Catholic Church's #1 public enemy. Long story short, she believed that God was speaking to her and had told her to start an uprising to get the English out of France. By doing so, she pissed off some high-powered Catholics who wanted her gone. So they decided to put her up for trial. But legit, they had no evidence against her, but they were like, whatever, fake it till you make it, right? So they just accused her of heresy with no evidence cause it was a lie. And on top of that, they denied her counsel, which was against the church's rules. They just hated her and wanted to get rid of her. I think there were like 70+ charges brought up against her. One of them being for wearing men's clothing, in which she was burned at the stake for. In 1431, in front of a crowd of thousands of people, they lit her on fire for wearing male clothing. But it was discovered after her death that she never even did this. Literally, they killed an innocent woman. Why? Because they were probably intimidated by her. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the slaying of women. Pope Innocent VII wasn't innocent at all. In fact, he was terrified of witches. He said that they were real and a huge threat, so he created a huge witch hunt. He dispatched his men to Germany to try witches, and due to the pressure he put on them, countless innocent women were killed after being accused of being witches. All because Pope Innocent was paranoid as hell. Not only that, but in 1487 a book was written all about these witches. It said that this book promoted burning them at the stake, and that influenced a number of killings. Plus, the book was just filled with lies, like saying these women would stop cows from producing milk and would ride on broomsticks in the air. It's just truly messed up and spread misinformation and paranoia. In our 4th spot, we have the burning of the dead. Apparently, the church holds grudges because 43 years after John Wycliffe passed away, they had his body dug up and burned. Now, let me explain how it got to this point. So, John saw fault in the Roman Catholic Church and saw how it was corrupt. So he believed that people should worship God and Jesus according to the Bible, not according to the popes and their bishops and priests, because people are corrupt. But the Bible is not. He also believed that people should interpret the Bible for themselves and not how other people tell them to interpret it. Well, the church did not like this at all. So when he passed away, they ordered all his books to be burned. They also ordered for his body to be unburied. And for some reason, it took them years to get this all done. So 43 years later, his body was finally unburied and then torched, and then his ashes were just thrown into the river. In our 3rd spot, we have the misuse of power. Just this year, it was discovered that the French clergy had taken advantage of over 200,000 young individuals since the 1950s. It is absolutely disgusting. The height of this happened between the 1950s to the 1970s. That's when most of the cases were discovered. Then there was a resurgence of cases in the early 1990s. And obviously the Catholic Church doesn't want anyone to know about this. In fact, it's obvious that the church was turning a blind eye to the perpetrators. They were more focused on protecting themselves and their reputation. They did not care for the victims at all. A report said, and I quote, "The Catholic Church's immediate reaction was to protect itself itself as an institution, and it has shown complete, even cruel indifference to those having suffered abuse. Like I said, it's absolutely disgusting. Moving on to number 2, we have the number of priests. In January of 2002, it was discovered that 234 priests have had allegations of sexual misconduct made against them in the last 50 years. You heard me, 234. That just makes me sick to my stomach. These individuals are using their title and control to take advantage of others. Some of the victims did file lawsuits against a number of dioceses and got multiple $million-dollar settlements in some cases, but that still does not take away their trauma and their PTSD. Even though the Catholic Church held a worldwide summit to talk about all this, it wasn't that effective, as priests were still caught taking advantage of individuals years later. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Inquisitions. It should not be forgotten that the Catholic Church would routinely arrest and torture Jews, Muslims, along with other individuals of different religions. They literally were like, convert to our beliefs or be executed, it's your choice. They were given a warning. They were told to vacate the area, and the people that stayed were arrested and then either forced to convert or be executed. Sometimes they even tortured them before execution. They used branding, would hang them from their thumbs or toes, and would break their bones. After that, that's when they were strangled and then burned at the stake.
Starting us off at number 10, modern day exorcisms. I think it's safe to say that most of us, at least me, assumed that the real life practice of exorcisms was a purely ancient and outdated ritual. Well, you might be surprised to learn that the Vatican has been known to perform them as recently as 2009. Not only that, but there is apparently a formal school inside the Vatican, and in 2018, 250 priests from all over the world attended the annual course. To make matters even more interesting, up until his death in 2016, there was a chief exorcist in the Vatican who claims to have performed a mind-boggling 130,000 exorcisms in his time. But it wasn't just him that performed them. Oh no, the Pope themselves have been known to get their hands dirty. When in 2009, Pope Benedict allegedly slammed Satan out of 2 men. And apparently in 2000, Pope John Paul II attempted one as well, but was unsuccessful, and later Father Ameth, the chief exorcist at the time, witnessed the possessed woman crawling up the walls like a spider. Next up at number 9, the secret archives. Apparently within the Vatican lies a room coined the secret archives, containing all the documents the church has collected throughout the centuries. But just what exactly is written on these documents? Well, that is the one secret that will be tricky to get the answer to. While it's not entirely impossible to get access to these documents, they are extremely confidential and only a select few can see. But even then, it's not a free-for-all rummage. You must tell them what you are there to see, and you will receive only those documents to reference. I don't know about you, but it seems very odd that they're keeping whatever is in that room a secret. I mean, what is it that they don't want us to know? Next up at number 8, tax evasion. It's pretty common knowledge that most churches around the world are tax exempt, and the Vatican is no different. Well, except for the scale. The Vatican receives a property tax break for all non-commercial properties containing a chapel. They've managed to figure out how to use this to their advantage, and between the years of 2006 to 2011, the Vatican evaded taxes that amounted to 4 billion euros. Like, think about how much money that is. Truly, it's staggering. But before you grab your picket signs and march down there yourselves, there was some justice. Thankfully, the European Court of Justice stepped in and ruled this completely illegal and forced the Vatican to cough up the cash as post-dated tax. But many argue that it wasn't enough. If you look back at accounts dating back to 1992, it's estimated that the Vatican has evaded nearly 13 billion euros. And that's just in the last 30 years. I don't even want to know how high that number could go if we dug even deeper. Next up at At number 7, bank dealings with the infamous World War II leader. The Vatican is a sovereign state, meaning essentially that they have legitimate and independent authority over their specific territory, even though the city resides within the borders of Rome. So, a part of this is that the Vatican has their own bank, called the Institute for the Works of Religion, or IOR. But truthfully, the term bank is a bit of a stretch. Now, it's not the existence of the IOR that they don't want you to know about, but who they have dealt with financially. Apparently, during World War II, the Vatican received a considerable church tax from Germany's leader annually. The tax was paid via the IOR so that it couldn't be easily traced by Western banks. And through these dealings, the IOR became recognized as the world's top offshore bank. Now, we know the church stored billions of dollars in this account, but the full extent was never revealed to the public, so we will never know just how much the church actually ended making off of those evil fascists. Next up at number 6, top secret court. Back in 1179, Pope Alexander created a secret court to handle sins of crimes based on conscience. The top secret court was a secret to the public up until 2009, but has been known to judge events on a wide spectrum, such as desecrating a communion wafer to priests breaking their vows of celibacy. Now, apparently the sinner who seeks absolution must write an anonymous petition to the Holy See, which is essentially the government of the Roman Catholic Church, which will then be submitted to the tribunal, which is kind of like a board that rules for the court. The tribunal will consider the matter, but the ultimate decision lies in the hands of the major penitentiary, who is the highest ranking archbishop, and it is only if he cannot come to a decision that is then passed along to the Pope. Allegedly, up until the 18th century, crimes of SA and murder were judged by this tribunal. Next up at number 5, post-war smuggling. Not only did the Vatican manage to make money off of the German war criminals for several years, but when all was said and done, they actually helped them escape the mess they had made. Understandably, after the war ended, Europe was not a big fan of the select German citizens that had caused an entire world war, so their solution was to flee the country and head towards South America. They apparently fled Europe using routes known as rat lines, and the Vatican knowingly gave them a helping hand. According to a researcher at Harvard, Gerald Steinecker, the Vatican's aid was based on the revival of European Christianity and the fear of the Soviet Union. And while that may be true, it's still incredibly hard to believe that someone actually pitied these people and helped them escape. To add insult to injury, the Vatican was often behind creating the false identities for the escapees prior to helping them flee. Next up at number 4, Pope John VIII. Now, if you don't know, according to the Catholic Church, the Pope must be a man. No exceptions. It is one rule they have never broken. Or have they? As the story goes, many years ago, Pope John VIII was elected, but as it turns out, it was more of a Pope Joan situation. She traveled from Athens and through a series of dares, found herself elected as the Pope. But after becoming pregnant, she gave birth in the middle of the road, ruining her cover, and was dragged for miles by a horse until she died. By the time they found out, she had already reigned for 2 years, and incredibly embarrassed, they covered up the entire affair so as not to tarnish their reputation. The alleged Pope Joan was very intelligent and proficient in law, theology, and philosophy, and managed to disguise herself with no one the wiser for 2 years, which is an incredible feat, especially in her time. Next up at number 3, dead man on trial. Back in 897, the Catholic Church actually put a dead man on trial. The trial was for the deceased Pope Formosus, and his successor, Pope Stephen VI, held it, accusing him of usurping the papacy. He had already been dead 7 months by the time he was put on trial, but nonetheless, they wanted to go through with it. They even assigned someone to speak on his behalf. Unsurprisingly, the dead man was found guilty, and all of his acts as Pope were declared null and void. His body was stripped of his sacred garments, and they cut off his 3 fingers of benediction. From there, he was cast into the river, the place where all the infamous criminals were disposed of for centuries. Coming in at number 2, Duplessis orphans. Flashback to 1940s and 1950s Quebec. Maurice Duplessis was the premier of Quebec at the time, and many of the social services were provided by the Roman Catholic Church. Now, because of the Catholic Church's belief that women needed to be married to have children, they would frequently urge mothers to give up their children to orphanages as they felt that the mothers were incapable of caring for them without husbands. Now, it gets sticky because not only is that just crazy, but many of these orphanages were operated by the church. Now, here is where Maurice Duplessis comes in. He discovered that he could get more money from the government if he declared the orphans mentally ill or unstable. Regular orphans would get him $1.25 a day, but psychiatric patients would get $2.75 a day. So under Duplessis, the provincial government deliberately misdiagnosed thousands of children for fiscal gain. These children were tested and abused and traumatized all so that the government could make money off of them. And don't forget, the Catholic Church owned these orphanages, so they too made money off of it. And coming in our number 1 spot, the Vatileaks. Back in 2012, an author named Gianluigi Nuzzi published a book entitled His Holiness, The Secret Papers of Benedict XVI, which contained confidential letters and memorandums from within the Vatican walls. How did he get all of this info? Well, the butler, of course. Paolo Gabriele, who had been the Pope's personal butler since 2007, aided the author by leaking highly classified information, for which he was later arrested by Vatican police in 2013. Now, with these documents leaked, authorities reviewed them and held an investigation to dive deeper into the scandal. It was uncovered that members from outside the Vatican were blackmailing secretly gay bishops, as the bishops were sleeping with them and not only breaking their vows of celibacy, but also hiding that they were homosexual, which, if you are unaware, is kind of a huge deal in the Catholic Church. With all the scandal of leaked documents, gay bishops, backstabbing butlers, the Pope eventually resigned in 2013, and the rest is history.